one slippery second. Not only was I right about winter being 6 more weeks, but also baseball's lockout lasting as long.
Punxsutawney Phil's prediction comes true once again. Hi everyone, this is Will O'Toole welcoming you to another edition of Park Grid Sports History. And of course, we got some good news as spring kind of approaches. Of course, everyone noticed that winter still lashed out. Probably its last reaches of its ice cold arms and fingers at us with yesterday's kind of crazy day between rain, sleet, and ice, and also some snow and really windy, cold weather. I can understand now how the people of Nome, Alaska live about 10 months of the year with yesterday's weather. But anyway, baseball did end its lockout. There are some kind of additions to the game, one being that there is going to be universal DH, and I know that ardent National League fans are probably very upset with this. I don't think enough to, let's say, turn their TVs off or to end season tickets or to forgo rooting for their favorite team. But it is the end of the difference between the American and National League. And this is something that has been, unfortunately, coming along for a long time. You know, baseball used to be, they've become more uniform with their umpires, how they actually even dress, the wardrobe and the equipment that they wear. For years, you know, the American League used to wear balloons, protective gear outside. Now everyone has adopted the inside chest protector. And of course, there was, quote unquote, a difference in the strike zone between the American League and the National. The National having quote unquote, a lower strike zone, while the American League having a higher strike zone. And this was due to the fact that the umpires, and I do have both. I do umpire, although not too well. I umpire softball and baseball on occasion. And sometimes I use the balloon, which is this padded, basically it's just a foam protector, as opposed to wearing the turtle-like shell that many umpires wear. Every once in a while, I just because I'm doing, let's say, a girls' softball game, I'll use that rather than don the hot equipment. It's much cooler for you, but you almost have to be like a toreador, a bullfighter, when the balls are coming at you, because you use that as basically a shield. So it's kind of like Ole defense. Ole, you don't want to get hit by the ball. So Ole, you hit the ball, have the softball hit the pad instead of your body. Anyway, as I digress as usual, baseball did end it. Here's one of the things that, and I got to look this up, but I did see this, that the All-Star game, which has been really watered down with interleague play, another thing that I have opposed, but it seems to have generated some interest within new baseball fans. But the All-Star game apparently is going to have a concert in the middle of the game, a la the Super Bowl. Now, I don't know how you're really going to do this, and I don't know how much the players are going to appreciate a 15-minute, let's say, or 20-minute concert performed by some band, I guess during the 7th inning stretch, and they will no longer have extra innings. So at the end of 9, I do believe that they'll just have the game end in a tie. And of course, here's growing up, and I guess I sound like an old, crusty old man right now, but the American League versus the National League, the All-Star game, was a perennial favorite of baseball fans because you didn't have interleague play, and many of the cities didn't have, and we were really spoiled here in New York, in the New York metropolitan area, because we got to see both the Yankees and the Mets. And it used to be when I was growing up that when the Yankees were home, the Mets were on the road and vice versa. So you really could turn your attention to the National League when the Mets were home, the American League when the Yankees were home. That's all been changed from when I was a kid. Now, I'm not saying it didn't happen prior to me following baseball. In fact, what I've really, and this is going to be the theme of the show, opening day first for expansion teams. But I did notice this. For many years, let's just say the Cincinnati Reds, which were the traditionally the first team that would open up the baseball season. They had parades and everything else. They would open up the day. I think kids would get a half day or even the whole day off from school in Cincinnati. And then they'd have the traditional home game for Cincinnati. But what I noticed when I was going through some of my research, and this is why I love this show, because it does force me to do some research, catch up on things, enlighten me on, let's say, rules or players or even events. But I didn't realize this. Many times in baseball scheduling, I'm not just talking about the Reds, but other teams as well, they would meet a team for opening day and then go on the road and meet an entirely different team. So in other words, a team would just come in for a one-game visit. And then the teams would go on the road, or the Reds or another home team would host an entirely new team in the next game. So it was pretty bizarre. And this even happened with the expansion teams. And this is why I'm devoting it. So things that you think are new are really things that were adopted many years prior to this. Anyway, what I'd like to devote the show to, and of course, I know I ended last week's show talking about Jimmy Gentile, and I'll come back to him, Jimmy Gentile. I will make some references to him either in today's show or in a later day show. Please, you have to bear with me. What I like about this show is, as I've told Howard, it's just you and I. We're sitting here talking all things sports, and I do go off on a tangent because one thing leads to another. Last week, I kind of ended the show with Jimmy Gentile and talked about, he was a pretty good ball player, typical of, let's say, I don't know what we think of first baseman, not being really gifted with a great glove, slow of foot, power-oriented, probably a 270 to 280 hitter in a good year, but usually can give you like 30, what you're hoping for, that kind of particular players, 35 and 90 to 100 RBIs. Well, Gentile did that for a number of years with the Baltimore Orioles. In fact, he finished second in the MVP voting in 1960 behind behind Roger Maris. I was about to say Rogers Hornsby. Wow, what a Freudian slip that is, right? And he had a really good season for the Orioles, had a succession of good seasons and just fizzled after that. 3, 4, 5 good seasons, which is not unheard of. The more and more you study some of these ball players and you say, man, this guy was a good player for about 4 or 5 years, the more and more you start to realize some of the baseball metrics that Bill James had really brought to the attention of baseball fans. And I'm not saying that general managers of the day didn't realize it, but really, baseball players, just like other athletes, they really have a small window. And of course, this is one of the arguments that the baseball union was making. And they really want to get that money up front early in their career because they realize it's going to evaporate the older that they get and the longer they have to wait for free agency. And of course, this is one of the sticklers. And that's why Bill James has always maintained that usually age 27 is the apex of a player's career. And he used quite a few people as examples of that. And if you do take a look at many of the great players, Hall of Famers, and maybe of what I like to call the cusp good players like Jimmy Gentile, etc., you'll notice that they really do have a good year about age 26, 27, and then they decline. So it's almost as if baseball itself catches up to them. And remember, 27 is a totally, I know this sounds inane the way I'm saying this, but being 27 is totally different from being 21. That's 6 years. Is a huge difference in speed, in strength, and all the rest of it. I'm not saying that 27-year-old players can't be good, but, playing these games takes a toll on the body. It really does. And that's why, for the minor leagues are there to constantly replenish. That's why these players are so committed to getting that money almost up front because they know that that window of really earning to your highest is so small. Anyway, I thought what I would do on the show today, since baseball opening day is approaching, and I do believe it's going to open on either Holy Thursday or Good Friday around April 14th or 15th. I don't know whether baseball is going to make up all those games that they're going to miss, because remember, March 31st was going to be opening day, I do believe. So you're talking about maybe 5-6 games for each team. Can they do it? Yeah. Will it be probably doubleheaders of 7 innings? Probably. Another innovation of Rob Manfred and today's owners and players, which I don't agree with. Just play the 9 innings and don't put a runner on second base. It is so totally watered down some of the statistics, or potentially could. Even the DH, if I can digress, has really watered down some of the offensive components that we grade the players on. I mean, if you can stick around for another 3 years, and I get it, that's why they, we want to, as a buddy of mine said yesterday, you want to see the great hitters hit and stay. Okay, I get it. Maybe if Aaron had the DH been adopted by the National League, maybe he spends his entire career with the Braves. Or maybe Mays spends his entire career with the Giants. Needless to say, it kind of taints the water keeping these guys on. Either you can play both sides, and I know I'm sounding like a crusty old man, but either you play both sides of the diamond or you don't play at all. And I think it's great, high school, little league, even college, you get more players involved. I get all that. Major league level, and as many people who are anti-DH, where would we be without the great Babe Ruth? He probably never would have realized his great home run potential. And I do love the great pitchers who could win games with their bat. And I'm talking Bob Gibson, Fergie Jenkins, Tom Seaver. All right. Another guy, and I was doing this when I was looking, was the left-handed pitcher, Warren Spahn for the Braves, Juan Marichal. All right. Don Drysdale, how do I forget him? I think he hit 7 home runs one year and a couple as a pinch hitter with those feeble Dodger teams that couldn't get out of their way on at least at bat. Maybe on the base bat's a different story. But I think it kind of taints even that. And I really do believe this, from an economic standpoint. Now you're paying a guy X amount of dollars to be a one-dimensional player, and you're also putting more pressure on the starting pitcher. And yes, you can say, well, face a pitcher, that's kind of like a breeze out. All right, so that's an out. That's basically an inning a game, which is huge, getting those outs. But you know what? Here's how I look at it. Pitchers, learn to hit, learn to bunt, help yourself with the bat. All right. I'm going off on a tangent because I really want to talk about first in baseball. And when I was looking at it, I was just thinking about this, and it's always great trivia questions. Who hit the first home run? And I thought I would devote some time to this, and maybe I'll even do next week's, depending on how long I rant about certain players and all the rest of it. But I figure I would start with 1969. And that was really the first year I started following baseball. And, of course, we had 4 teams that year that entered the league. It wasn't the first time baseball expanded. If you recall, in 61 and 62, baseball expanded with the Los Angeles Angels and the new Washington Senators in 1961 in the American League, and the Mets and the Astros in the National League. And, of course, since then, the Astros have changed leagues, the Brewers coming in. Ironically, too, it's the Brewers, because now that's a segue to 1969. The Brewers never existed in 69. Technically, it was the Seattle Pilots. And when Bud Selig bought the team prior to the 70 season, he took the resources from the Seattle Pilots. So they actually went defunct, and he just took the players and, let's say, the uniforms, or at least the uniform colors, and he took the balls and the bats and maybe the garbage cans that they kept the bats in, and he took that team with him to Milwaukee. Anyway, I'd like to do some first. And since I am talking about, and I did devote some time to the Seattle Pilots in a previous show, but I do have a ton of cards here to want to show you some interesting stuff. Anyway, actually, the first player to hit a home run in Pilot history was Mike Hegan. Here's what I did find out, though. In 69, the Pilots won their first or opening game. In 69, the Padres won their opening game. In 69, the Expos, and we'll get back to them because I do want to talk a little bit about the Expos. They win their first game opening day. In fact, I remember seeing that game. And in 69, I said San Diego, Kansas City, which got off to the best start of any of the four teams in 69. They won their first game. In 61, I was looking at this. The Angels won their first game. And Houston won their first game. But Washington and the Mets, of course, lost. And the reason why I put those together is that they have a commonality there. And that is that Gil Hodges would be associated with both teams. One with the Senators as a manager, and then later coming over to the Mets as their new manager after he played a year for them as basically a washed-up first baseman with the old Dodgers, and they sent him back into the East and to New York, where he was one of the kings of Flatbush. My mother-in-law just loved Gil Hodges, and he's one of those guys, unfortunately, that is a cusp Hall of Famer. And I got to be clear about this. I'm almost to the point where if you really think the guy's a Hall of Famer, put him in. And not only did Gil Hodges have a great career with those, he was part of that whole Dodger dynasty. And yes, they only won one World Series while in Brooklyn. They do win two during that whole 50s decade. They were a solid team, a very good team. Now, Robinson, of course, is in the Hall of Fame. Campy is in the Hall of Fame. Snyder's in the Hall of Fame. Well, Hodges had a big role in that. Maybe his numbers don't add up to the greats at first base, like McCovey, Frank Thomas, or, of course, Lou Gehrig. But, he's right in that echelon of players like or Jim Thome, who is really an underrated great player, as a matter of fact. That's another story for another day. But Hodges is right in there with, you can actually equate him to like a Cepeda, all right? Maybe even a Jim Rice, that type of player. And I know Rice played outfield, totally different era, totally different But, the Dodgers are not winning all of those pennants without Gil Hodges at first. And then, of course, I don't know how you can disregard the sense that, yes, Casey becomes the manager of the Mets in 62 and Wes Westrum followed, but it was really Gil Hodges that really brought winning and a winning attitude to the Mets. And I talked about how he was traded from the Senators as their manager to the Mets and immediately brought a different attitude to the Mets. And the person you look to is Tom Seaver, who plays a part in what I'm going to be talking about today. Anyway, Mike Hegan hit the first home run in Pilot history. And the reason why I have so much, he is the first and only all-star in Pilot history. He has a pretty good stance there, by the way. And this is a Sporting News card from 1970. Topps baseball card, Sporting News on the top. Hideous uniforms for the Pilots. I do like usually blue and gold, but these are hideous uniforms. How do I know that? Take another look at these uniforms. Now, this is 1971. This is actually 1971. I know these are 71 cards. And look, it says Pilots instead of saying Brewers up there. But look at the logo. That is basically, the steering wheel of a ship. I know it has another name. I'm just going to call it it's the helm of the ship, I do believe, okay? Or the steering wheel. But anyway, a couple of bats coming out of it. I did a show about the logos of baseball, some of the ugly ones, some of the really good ones. But he has actually a Pilot top there. But this is a 71 card. And I don't mean, I'm pretty sure it's a 71 card. And by then, the Brewers were in their second year of existence in Milwaukee. And of course, who remembers these? The scratch-off cards that came, I believe, in the 1970 edition of Topps. And usually you had either their best player or the captain or their most identifiable player. I know with the Reds, we had the scratch-off Pete Rose. It was Tom Seaver with the Mets. So Hegan hits the first home run, and this one is a guy, and that is he hit it off Jim McLaughlin, who played for the Angels. But I do remember McLaughlin pitching for the Angels, and then I think in the winter of '69, the Reds traded for him, and they traded Chico Ruiz for Jim McLaughlin. McLaughlin was a serviceable pitcher for the Reds, basically 500, a couple of games over 500. I think in 1970 he might have won 12 games or 10 games for the Reds. Unfortunately, no, he died very young, and I think he had cancer, a bone cancer. I just remember him as having a lot of freckles on his face, and like I said, being a serviceable pitcher for those big red machines of 70, 71, and I think he even pitched on 72 for the Reds. But he was their not a frontline pitcher, but definitely your fourth, fifth guy for Sparky Anderson. But that was Mike Hegan. So there's an answer to a trivia question. Not only is he their first guy to hit a home run, he actually, well, wait a minute. I have to pull this back because we've talked about this too. Actually, Mike Hegan makes the All-Star team in '69, but never appears. And then they have first baseman who played for I'm going to get it right now. He would play for Don Mincher. See, sometimes I can remember. I tell you, sometimes I just have brain lock. Mincher makes the All-Star team or is named to the '69 All-Star game, and he doesn't appear because he's hurt. So it was their only year in the league, and this is so typical of that Pilot franchise. They had two guys named, both were injured, so the Pilots technically did not have a player appear in the All-Star game or even sit on the bench. All right. Although they do have, Hegan is technically the first guy named to the All-Star team in the Pilots' first and only year. And of course, by the way, the first Mariner named was Rupert Jones, 1977. So if you want to do some trivia on that. Next, I got to talk about this guy. I'm going to hide these because the reason why I bring this guy up, Mike Fiore. He was in the other picture, and he's a first baseman, as if you couldn't tell by his pictures. And for some reason, Topps Baseball just loved getting him in the stretch as a first baseman, and they are consistent about it because this is 70, 71, and I believe 72. Those are ugly Topps baseball cards. I never liked them. This is the 72. So Fiore is the first guy to hit a home run in Kansas City history. The problem with Kansas City, they didn't do it on opening day. And as I said, Kansas City won. They actually got off to the best start of the first of the four teams, and actually had, and this is what Jim Bouton, the late Jim Bouton, talks about and I would recommend Ball 4 to anybody who really wants to get an idea of baseball before free agency, of a diary of the Seattle Pilots. It's probably one of our really, when you talk, it's like finding a new chapter, to, let's say, or a new play of Shakespeare's, unearthed it. This is really our only, it's a great understanding of the inner workings of the Pilots, personalities. It's all from Bouton's perspective. I realize that. There are many people who have problems with Bouton, but for me, it's one of the funniest pieces of literature I've ever read. And as I've done on the show a couple of times, has one of the best endings of any book in American literature. whether it's fiction or nonfiction, whether it's sports or history or drama, whatever. And of course, it's, and I'm going to really mess up the words, but Boughton says, in the end, you realize you don't have a grip on the baseball grips you. And this is why he continued his pursuit of staying in the major leagues. And it made a pretty good living, too. And he had winters off. Anyway, the Pilots, Kansas City and Mike Fiore, let me just say, it takes like 8 games for the Kansas City Royals to register their first home run. And who do they do it on? Pretty good pitcher, John Blue Moon Odom. Mike Fiore hits the first home run in Royals history. And I did have I had a Topps card with the back of Fiore's baseball card from 1970. And it does give him, it does pay tribute to the fact that he hit the first home run in Royals history. But getting back, Boughton even mentions that the Royals did it right. They started off, struggled. I know they got off to a quick start. I think they were 5-5 after the first 10 games. Not bad for an expansion team. But they had a lot of young talent. Of course, on that team was Lou Piniella, who would win the Rookie of the Year. I think he's the first. Yeah, he's got to be the first expansion team Rookie of the Year ever, especially named in the first year of the franchise's history. Hit .282 for the Royals that year. Was a Baltimore guy. How Weaver let him go is beyond me. Probably he didn't. Probably didn't play good enough defense, probably, for Earl Weaver. Arm was kind of weak, although he makes a great play in the 78 playoffs. That's another story for another day. Anyway, Fiore hits the first home run in Royals history. And like I said, does it off Blue Moon Odom. And, of course, the A's were in the midst of really becoming a great dynasty unto themselves. All right, it takes them until 71 where they win the American League West. But on that 68 team or 69 team, they have Jackson, who hits 47 home runs. They have Bando, who is an underrated, really good player. Maybe not enough to make the Hall of Fame, but we've talked about him in a previous episode. That is .252 batting average. Really hid the fact that the guy got on base, hit some home runs, RBIs, played solid defense, was a really good player. You had Campaneris, who everyone remembers that he played 9 positions in one game. You have Rudy. You have Rick Monday. And, of course, Monday is the man who rescued the American flag when he was playing for the Dodgers in 1976 from being burnt in the middle of Dodger Stadium. And actually, Monday, I think, is the first free agent ever drafted, or is the first official draft Monday. I always felt bad for him because he got traded just as the A's started winning. But he does win a World Series. I was always glad about that, even though I hated the Dodgers in 81. And actually hits that big home run against the Expos. So Monday was on that team. Then you have other good players. Of course, you have Catfish Hunter. You have Raleigh Fingers, who's going to emerge eventually as a top-notch relief pitcher. You have Vida Blue, who does make his first appearance in 69. 69. Actually, no, 1970, because I think he spun a no-hitter. And, of course, Catfish threw the perfect game in 68 against the Twins. Anyway, so pretty good team that Fiore hits the home run. He gets traded to the Red Sox. They thought he was the cure for first base. I don't know what they saw in him, because really Mike Fiore, here's his career. And it's not a knock. Believe me, I'm not making a knock against Fiore. He did have a solid season in 69, 12 homers, 35 RBIs, 274 batting, drew 84 walks in only 107 games. And then, like I said, he's age 24. And then, for whatever reason, I guess maybe pitching caught up to him. And he was never the same player. In fact, it would take him, ready for this, he would only hit one more home run in his career. And he would only total another 15 RBIs in his career. But he still was able to draw some walks. So I'm thinking, maybe in today's game, a guy like Fiore would be that perfect pinch hitter off the bench, obviously, who could draw you a walk and start something. Anyway, that's Mike Fiore. And maybe that is why he took so many pictures as, fielding a ball. Now, I want to get to this guy because I am getting, you know what? I'm going to go back to 61 because I do want to talk about this. There is something in this as well. The very first player in Angel history to hit home runs for the Angels. Notice what I said, home runs. And I hope I find him right here. Please let me find him. I just had it. Was none other than Ted Kluszewski. Oh, here he is. I got this is a tribute to my brother, who is a huge fan of the Reds. Made me a Cincinnati fan. This is Ted Kluszewski, circa like 1956, 57 with the Cincinnati Reds. I love the uniforms. And if you can see, he had massive biceps to the point that his uniform couldn't fit around his arms. So one Sunday prior to the game, he tore off the sleeves and went out basically in a basketball jersey because his arms, I think they were 18 inches. You know, he was a tight end, All-America player, football player at Indiana University. And smartly, I think, chose baseball. Those are really nice uniforms by the Reds, by the way. Interestingly enough, that the Reds got rid of facial hair, or were the last team to allow facial hair. And here you have the Cincinnati logo with a big handlebar mustache, circa the early or the late 19th century. Anyway, Kluszewski was a pretty good hitter. He's like the Jimmy Gentile, only I do believe this. A much better player than Gentile. Let me just see if I can call him up. I just want to give you. He hit his first home run, and I do have this listed. Please bear with me. Kluszewski actually hit it off two guys, one named John Papa and the other Milt Pappas. The interesting reason I say this is because both names are Greek in nature, and they both mean father. Pappas is from a derivation for father, and John Papa was Papa as well. John Papa. So I guess who's your daddy now? It's Ted Kluszewski with the two guys. And of course, interestingly enough, Pappas came close to pitching a perfect game with the Cubs against the San Diego Padres in 1972. And it was like a 3-2 pitch? And of course, instead of calling the strike, and it was pretty close, the umpire called it a ball, and San Diego had life. He does pitch the no-hitter, but you could see, if you ever see the film of that, he is really mad, and it's amazing that he was able to really get back and get his no-hitter. Pappas was one of those guys, the Reds traded for Frank Robinson to the Orioles for Pappas. He never really reached his potential with the Reds. He was another guy, serviceable, much better pitcher than McLaughlin. I think he won 132 games. Had some years where he won 16 games, I do believe. But anyway, I just want to do this. Here's Kluszewski, and I'll give you his career. Had some monster years with the Reds, let's face it. A cusp Hall of Famer. He only has a 31.5 WAR. Hit 279 home runs. But ready for this? Now, everyone's going to say, well, he played in Crosley. Okay. So, ready for this? Age 25, 1950 for the Reds. Hits 25 and 111. Then has a down year with the Reds, 13 and 77. Then age 27, he's 16 and 86. He had 11 triples that year, though, at age 26 with 24 doubles. And then at age 28, so I said almost like fit that Bill James kind of thing. Age 28, he has his breakout year, 40, 108, 316. And he finished actually seventh in the MVP. But the next 2 years, ready for this? Hits 49 homers for the 54 Reds, 141 ribbies, finishes second in the MVP. And then the following year, 47, 113, finishes sixth in the MVP. And then 1956 at age 31, he's basically done 35, 102, finished MVP 14th. Made the All-Star team all those years. Had some good years. Goes to the Angels in 61 after spending the 59 season with the White Sox. Well, spent about 31 games, helped them get into the playoffs. Into the World Series. And then plays one more year, age 36, 15 homers, 39 RBIs, 243 for the Angels that had 70 wins their first year. And of course, he hit the first 2 home runs in Angels history. Then I just want to give you this guy, Billy Claus, hits the first home run in new Washington Senator history. Now, Billy Claus, looking at him, totally different player, guys, from Ted Kluszewski. And what I mean by that, with Mickey Vernon's, he was the first manager for the new Washington Senators. Here's what Billy Claus did. He's not even listed. He only played 91 games for the Washington Senators that year. Hit 40 home runs. And actually, ready for this, he played for Boston, played for the Braves, started out with the Braves, then went to Boston, then went to Baltimore, and then played his 1 year with Washington. And at least he does something good, and that is hit the first home run in new Washington Center, ex-Texas Ranger history. And he actually hit it. Ready for this? He hit it. Well, I want to say, yes, he hits it, and this is why I put them together. He hit it off a really good pitcher. Not in the realm of maybe Bob Gibson, but reading about him, Jim Mudcat Grant. Now, he's in a Pirate uniform here. He was pitching for, I do believe, he might have been pitching for Cleveland in 61. But Mudcat Grant is kind of interesting. And I did know this, and I forgot this, and then I did know this. He was the first black pitcher to win 20 games in the American League. And he was the American League, and I think he does it with the Minnesota Twins in 65. Not only that, but Mudcat Grant goes on and writes a book, and he's a poet. And I want to end the show with a poem by him, or at least post it. But I know that he was a broadcaster. He's a pretty interesting guy. And maybe I'll devote another show to just guys that you didn't realize were things other than baseball players. And Mudcat Grant, he does win a World Series, fortunately for him, in 1971 with the Pirates. But he is a journeyman. Does pitch in the World Series for the 65 Twins. Played for Cleveland. Made a couple All-Star teams. Played for Cleveland. That I know. Played for Oakland. I do have a picture of him. But, just that was the end of his career. Played for Pittsburgh. And he played for Montreal. And I want to save that for a second, because I do want to do one other guy before I get to this. And that is the other guy who hit a home run for the Houston Astros. And that is Roman Miejas. Now, like Kluszewski, he hit 2 home runs in the game. And he hit his, I'm just going to get this to you. Roman Miejas hit it off Al Larry. And this guy, Don Cardwell, who was a victim of many of those home runs that I researched last week, either by McCovey and Mays or Aaron and Matthews. He seemed to be a victim of quite a few. But Roman Miejas, who I think started with Pittsburgh, and the reason I picked this one, it's kind of an odd picture. It looks like he's looking up, waiting obviously for a fly ball. It looks like, or like that great baseball book I keep telling you about. It looks like he's waiting for someone to throw him some popcorn. Roman Miejas, though, hits the first home runs in Houston Astro history. The other guy who hit a home run was Hal Smith. And, of course, all you Pittsburgh fans will know that he hit a crucial home run in that Game 7 of the 60 series to give the Pirates a 9-7 lead. Now, as I'm finishing up the program, Mudcat Grant, what does he have to do? And what does Gil Hodges have to do? And so here's Hodges, and here's Mudcat Grant. The Montreal Expos, first game ever. And I hope I find it here now. Please let me find it. Oh, boy. I've been waiting for this the whole time. And I better spout this out before I lose it. Oh, let me just get this. Just for you guys. Ed Spezio, whose son also played for the St. Louis Cardinals. But Ed Spezio hits the first home run in San Diego Padre history. All right, this is a 1970 card, and he hit it off the great Don Wilson, who could have been a great pitcher. And we'll talk about Spezio maybe another day. Ready for this? 1969, the very first home run ever hit by a Montreal Expo was done by a pitcher, Dan McGinn, who played like 3 years. And McGinn is the only one to hit it off a future Hall of Famer. It was Tom Seaver. Now, what does this all have to do? Seaver pitched. I think he gave it up in the second or third inning, as I recall. McGinn hit his first and I think his only home run in his history. And who was who was managing the Mets? It was none other than Gil Hodges. McGinn, I just want to see his stats. He was 15-30 in his career. Ready for this? I do have his hitting. He hit his first and only home run against Tom Seaver. The winning pitcher, or the starting pitcher that day, was none other than Jim Mudcat Grant. You can't make some of this stuff up out. Things really come back into play and all the rest of it. And I just want to read you a couple of lines before I go here from Jim Mudcat Grant, his poem. Now, he did have a book on the black pitchers, great black pitchers. And I'll talk about that, and I'll probably save this. But Life by Jim Mudcat Grant. I'll just read you the first stanza. Life is like a game of baseball, and you play it every day. It isn't just the breaks you get, but the kind of game you play. Stop and look the whole team over. You've got dedication there. You're bound to be a winner with men who really care. Your pitcher's name is courage. You need him in this game. For trust and faith, your keystone men, the grounders they will tame. And I'll probably finish this next week because I think it does have, maybe it's not Shakespeare, but it has a lot. And he's a talented man. And this is Will O'Toole with first home runs in expansion teams from the 60s on Park Ridge Sports History. Thanks for joining us.